Hello everyone, welcome to today's episode of Velocity Kinetics of this Swacecast. It is the 4th of May. Today I've got a few things I need to do today, which is why this is a driving Swacecast, not the recent sit around. Although petrol prices have come down slightly, I only paid £1.50 a litre, still too bloody much, but I only paid £1.50 a litre for fuel yesterday, which compared to when I went up to Newcastle the week before, I was paying £1.55 a litre. So, small wins and all that. This car recently did the Newcastle trip because I went up for my mother-in-law's 60th birthday. It devoured the miles again on the way up. I had a brief concern with this car before we went up, where the wheel nuts, I'd heard a lot of squeaking. I was trying to work something out as to, it was driving me mad, going, what the hell is making all that noise? And then I thought, well, out of curiosity, I'll just see if a wheel nut is loose, and I could turn them by hand. I got the tyre iron out the boot. I tightened everything up as much as I could. Volvo were no help, because more than fairly, I suppose, they didn't want to touch something that John Banks had sold me, because technically it's a John Banks defect, if there was a defect. John Banks took a look, retightened everything, but apparently it's the design of the wheel nuts. They spin, but they're not loose, so to speak. The guy said, Tom on the service desk said they're called, one of their garage guys calls them spinny nuts. Fantastically technical term, that. Anyway, ooh, that was a bit harsh. That's why I don't skip gears very often on the way down the gearbox. But today I want to talk about something I overheard on a TikTok Sarah was watching the other day. Now the person she was watching, I believe it was an Xpeng they had. Now, so I've seen this feature before on an Audi Q7 we were looking at. Now, excuse that squeaky clutch. I think the actuator and the pedal needs some oil. / I think it seems to vary on which part of my foot I use to actually press the clutch. Bit of healing. So, there we go. It seems to depend on which bit of my foot I use to press the clutch as to whether there's a problem. Whether it squeaks, sorry. So, well, you might hear it a lot, and it does also seem to depend on how much beans I'm giving it at any given moment. But so onto this Xpeng. I don't remember the model, as I didn't hear that. I was trying to place what an Xpeng is or was in a few years potentially. So the feature it had, it was a 7-seat vehicle, so it had the third row seats in the back. Now, for the most part, the vehicles I know of, apart from when I saw it on the Q7, if there was a third row of seats, they were manual. A bit like, I suppose, the old Vauxhall Zafira thing, where they pull out the bottom of the floor, and then fold up. In this Q7, they were electric, and in the Xpeng, they're electric, so they'd raise up and down electronically. And it's got me wondering, sort of, is that just showing off for no reason? Does it need to be like that? Could it not, what's wrong with the manual mechanism? It's got me wondering, sort of, yes, the the electronic ability to raise those seats up and down does raise a lot of usability positives. So you're not limited to being able-bodied, for example, being able to do it, or at least don't have to be super physically well, should we rephrase. You can do it whatever state of health you are in. However, the trade-off is, in my mind, that's one more thing to break. It's adding more unnecessary / avoidable weight to the vehicle. And then what happens if you accidentally do it manually? And the reason why I raise that point is I'm pretty sure I nearly broke a boot lid in a dealership. I was, it might have been at a Ford dealership actually, where I hadn't cottoned on it was an electric rise and electric recline. So I did it manually. It must have had some sort of smart gesture thing to it, where it started to open when I touched it, but there was me thinking I'd actually been the clever one to actually make it lift and start moving. So what I then did is when I tried to close it, it wouldn't move, and I kept forcing it, and the car seemed to need a few minutes to sort of have its concussion, shall we say, and then go again. And that's my concern with a lot of these electric add-ons. Now, if there is no physical way to do it manually, and I will say in defence of the Audi that we saw, I didn't see, but I wasn't looking properly, I didn't see, as if it didn't look like there was any sort of old school manual way to lower it. It looked like that was the button and that was the only way, and so on. And it looked like the same in this Xpeng, or at least from what I could see without my glasses on, which is not an awful lot. But it does beg the question about things being electrified in cars that don't need it. And it does leave me a little... Oh, come on. There we go. Hope if I found the right gear for getting up the hill there. That was me fault, not the car. That was me doing brain farting. But it does get me wondering, what's the point in electrifying everything that can be electrified? And then we come back around to that point I mentioned a few minutes ago, weight. Because when I was looking for cars for my dad before he settled on the Nero, the power memory seat he needs, like what this Volvo's got, what this Volvo's actually got two of, they are very heavy compared to a standard seat that sits on normal rails. So you can understand why so many manufacturers started to do away with them, basically. And I can't say I disagree with the move in terms of saving weight, getting more out of a tank of fuel. But for how often, particularly on that, I could understand it if it was the second row of seats that were electronically operated, because they will be flattened a bit more often than, say, the third row. The third row, to me, makes no sense, because either you've got a big family and need one or both of those seats up all the time, or you've just bought a car that happens to have it, and they're going to spend most of their time flattened. That's just how it runs through in my head. I could be extremely wrong. I would like to be extremely wrong with that thought. But I've got no way to know. Unfortunately, a lot like these Swacecasts and the sort of more diarist direction that this channel has recently taken. Not deliberately, it just feels like a nicer format to move to in some ways. It just in my head, it just doesn't quite seem to line up. It doesn't seem quite like it would work very well. But like I said, I'd love to be wrong. I want to be wrong on that, and well, let's say we'll see. My speed limit wrong. Don't get me wrong, though, there are a lot of electronic things on cars that are fantastic. At some point, in some ways, the electric dashboard, as much as I blow hot and cold on them, they do have their benefits. I mean, you can get your speed right down to the single mile an hour. Speed limiter, like I tend to use a lot when I use it a lot when I'm on the motorway, because you don't realise just how often you'll just rest your foot on the accelerator and then you start gaining speed. Because I did it once in the Swace where I wasn't thinking things through, and it gained speed quite quickly. Wasn't my intention to gain speed, wasn't my intention at all. I've done some of the patching on this road. It wasn't my intention to gain speed in that matter at all, but then you've also got things like eco modes and things that make things better. So there are some bits that just make sense. Or the other thing, I can't remember what car it was I saw it on. It was basically had an electric tonneau cover, which again I'm torn on, because purely from a ableist or ableism perspective, it's a fantastic addition. No need to leave the tonneau cover permanently pulled over or permanently open, or wait until you're feeling better to do it, or better enough to do it. Oh, you spanner. That white van that's just passing now could have chosen a better point to pull out. Could have really chosen a better point to pull out. But anyway, it baffles my mind. Box with problems. I don't know if it's broken down. It just baffles my mind, some of the additions. But like I said, I suppose it depends on what version of my brain wakes up that day. As in, if the overly logical part of it wakes up first. I left that a bit late, but I decided a bit late. If the overly logical bit wakes up first, then of course that bit of the brain for that day is going to go, well, this makes no fucking sense. But if it's the yeah, that makes sense bit, then the overly logical bit's going to be there somewhere, but it's not quite going to be so sort of Muscovy ducks. Not quite so, what the hell is the point of that? They haven't done half the patching out here. Anyway, do you know what? I've forgotten half the damn thing. I was waiting for ages for this camera to charge up. So I didn't know how long it had been since I last used it, and I didn't know whether I'd accidentally let the battery discharge. So I had a whole raft of points I was going to make, and I perhaps should have picked up my phone and did a phone video with it instead. Oh, Jesus Christ. Sorry, the pothole I've just straddled, it's gone through the temporary layer underneath. That's the sort of pothole that I don't care what vehicle you've got, anything less than a tractor or a lorry, and even then they might kiss their tyres goodbye, but anything less than them, just insane. Like I said, I think I apologised a few minutes ago, that squeaky clutch pedal, like I said, I think it's the actuator, because sometimes I think it depends on what bit of my foot I use to apply it, because when I'm using the clutch, like trying to do something on the bite point, for example, clutch feels fine, the bite point isn't high or getting higher, neither is the car like stalling or anything, so like the clutch is burning out. At least it doesn't feel like that to me. I've never had a clutch in that position where it was burning out. So I'm just working off my own feelings and what I've heard people describe. My old Civic has finally sold at John Banks. It's been there for ages. I thought when Paul took it off my hands, it was going to get basically shoved on the back of a low loader, get off to an auction, out of John Banks' hair, and that would have been the end of it. But no, they were determined to sell it themselves. So it's finally gone. The guy on the service desk, he sometimes works on the market stall. Now I've had to change market stall because the normal guy I would use, he's had to sell up because he's been done for diddling. Or at least being in possession of images to do with diddling. So, it's a shame because they always say it's always the nice people, isn't it? It's always the people you least suspect. But anyway, but he works on the fruit and veg stall I've started to use now, and he was telling me that it's had. He can't be 100% sure because he's obviously had his normal stuff to do. But if he's heard everything that people have said about that car correctly, it's had a new wet belt, new water pump. It's had oil change, it's had a gearbox oil change. Basically everything you can think of, every single ancillary you could think of has been changed on it. And for a car that was a 68 but in 2019 registered with I handed it back with about 40,000 on the clock, so when I bought it was about 33 on the clock. When I bought it, I had about 33 on the clock, so that's not very good. But something I was reading on Reddit reckons that Honda has really dropped the ball in build quality recently, and actually Mazda, which have always been a pretty bloody solid make in the first place, have somehow taken over in the king of Japanese build quality. Not that Mazda was ever built badly. It's just taking it up another level. And with some of the, I will say, with some of the interiors, I'm not fond of the CX-5s and the CX-60s myself, but I have to give them credit where it's due, because I do keep an eye on the price of them, because I know Sarah would like an SUV, and there's a lot of them on sale, the Mazda CX-5 and CX-60s, that is. And her dad was interested in a CX-5, I believe it was, or at least he was looking at them on Kazoo. Actually, their interiors look bloody nice. I have to concede it. The anti-SUV bit of me is like, no, don't do it. Don't concede. But the logical bit of the brain's going, look, a nice interior is a nice interior. What do you want from me? And like I say, I have to listen to the logical bit of the brain, much as I want to listen to my ethical bit of my brain, or the bit that controls my ethics, my views, and so on. So it be what it be. I will say it's nice at the moment seeing petrol prices starting to come back down. I know I'm flitting all over the place, but welcome back to a normal Swacecast, where Chris's brain goes off in 42 different tangents, Ross Noble style, and tries to come back. And no, I don't have ADHD. If I have it, it's self-inflicted. Now, partially self-inflicted, because sometimes at my day job I have so many things to do, and then I've got so many people wanting things ASAP. You have to question how ASAP their ASAP is, and then your attention's pulled about 19 different ways whilst accomplishing nothing. Don't get me wrong though, there's still too high fuel prices. I don't fully understand what's happening in the Strait of Hormuz at the moment. I don't understand what's happened there. If I knew I was going to talk about this, I would have gone and looked as to what was, try and get an idea as to what was happening. I've just wandered onto this topic myself, but petrol in the UK, at least, I think everywhere else follows a similar model. It's rocket rise and feather fall. And since what's happened with petrol prices going through the roof, a lot of places, I know there was something in the East Anglian Daily Times, was it East Anglian Daily Press? Anyway, the EAD, whichever one it was talking, a forequarter owner was doing his best compo face, that sort of that long, like that Jeremy Clarkson. It's that Jeremy Clarkson-esque long face, like when he's trying to pretend he's been really sorry, sort of. And it was, and he was saying how he'd experienced so much more making off without paying crime. He'd lost about $6,000 in a week. Because people seem to think there is a lot of profiteering going on, and it brings on quite an interesting point about journalistic standards and ethics and things, because a lot of tabloid press have reported that it's just profiteering. However, whilst I never worked in a forecourt or petrol station or anything like that, I can also believe that the margins are very small. You don't need to tell me twice that the margins are small to non-existent. So, what do you do at that point? And I'm torn, because with this rocket rise and feather fall, when you hear how much crude oil has dropped, granted that doesn't take into account the processing, the delivery, and whatever other taxes and import costs are lumped on as it goes. Doesn't take that into consideration at all. So actually, perhaps it is about right where it is. I don't know, but I do have to agree, and I do freely agree that, and I feel at least in the UK, because in the UK we have a unique way of petrol pricing. Now, most places will have some form of fuel duty tax or value added tax. There will be some form of tax typically at the pump, because there just is. Most places. The UK, for some reason, we somehow have managed to have it both ways. So we somehow, you pay value-added tax, you pay fuel duty tax, which is about 60% of what your 50 to 60% of what the not 50 to 60%. Sorry, was it 50? Knocking on for it's somewhere around the 50-60% mark. So I was at the beginning thinking, is it percent or pence? But either way, it's still a huge amount. So if you took away the fuel duty tax, petrol in the UK could easily be hovering around about £1 a litre. And then we pay value-added tax, which for years is 17.5%. It did go up to 20, and it did go down to 15 at one point. I'm not sure where it is at the moment. I think it's still at 17.5%. I suppose it shows in some ways how privileged I am, that I can just ignore what the VAT is on things, and not need to think twice about that much. Slash, it shows my ignorance and not being able to write it off, because I'm sure I could, if I incorporated or somehow made Velocity Kinetics a company, I believe I could somehow write off a lot of my fuel costs, like I'm doing for this video, as business expense. But how you would do that, I don't know, and they're closing all sorts of loopholes like that quite regularly. So, there we are. But it also to me shows as how much, I'm not even sure how I want to word this, it shows to me how much the average UK person loses on a weekly basis going to the pump. So when I filled this up, granted I did use the higher octane, however you should describe it, I did use the higher octane fuel because I was doing motorway miles. I thought, you know what, it's worth it, and I don't know how long this has been stood for. I don't know how long it's been since, apart from the last time I went up to Newcastle. I don't know whether it's been primarily used for short journeys or whether it's done regular long slogs. So I put the faster fuel in, and my fuel light was on. I think it was about 40 or 35 miles left in the tank, and I typically do 2 clicks in my sway, so I just keep going until I can see it about to come out the fuel filler cap, which I know some people say you shouldn't do that, and I don't know, it's the way I've always done it, particularly with the Baleno, when I had to get every last drop of fuel to go as far as it could on a weekly basis. But it cost me just short of £85 to fill this, and this hasn't got the biggest of fuel tanks. It cost me £60 to fill it up from half with normal stuff yesterday. Where are you going? That Nissan was coming at too fast. I thought it was going to be a shunt between that Nissan and the Evoque. Maybe I've made too many Final Destination jokes in my time. I will say, with it coming down, because in another episode of this I had mentioned Sarah and I were worried that we're going to go on holiday on Friday. Actually, it's coming Friday. Going to go all the way up to Scotland and then not be able to do anything because we spent all the money getting to Scotland. I am still a little worried about that, especially if the orange turd in the White House decides to do something else stupid. The only thing he could do correctly is die, and even then he'd somehow fuck that up. Sorry, that's my own political opinion. But yeah, barring something else happening that really screws everything up, we should be fine now with that little bit of easing off. Shall we describe it as a little bit of ease off in fuel prices? Does make things a bit easier. I will say I'm a bit nervous about driving all that way, because it's the first time I'll have driven that far. I'm talking miles, not time, because there was one occasion where Sarah and I were coming back from Morpeth, and because of all the Christmas traffic and someone sat in the outside lane of the A1 at 55 miles an hour, and I was thinking, oh, is it lorries just fighting each other? No, just someone in a Mitsubishi Outlander, no one ahead of him, just sat there tooting along in the outside lane, and I believe I did perform an undertake to get around, because it's like, you're holding everyone up, and then suddenly I was able to get on. But with how much traffic there was, that was a 9-hour drive back, and that was in bad traffic. In good traffic, with where we're going to in Scotland, good traffic where we're going to in Scotland is 7 hours. So we'll see. That'll be the longest the Swace has been used in a while. Why do I smell burning rubber? I smell something. Now it's gone. Maybe it might have been something on the other side. But yeah, I'm a bit worried about that long drive. I also don't know what Sarah's going to be like. Now, she is off on the Thursday before we go, so she's got time to rest, recharge, depending on how busy the next 2 days are at work. Well, 3 if you include today. And the other thing I suppose I'm very nervous about, and I'm sorry, Sarah, if you're watching this whenever this goes out, I love you, but I'm nervous about the handoff between her and I as we drive. And it's also one of those things. Sometimes when I'm with her, it does make me question my own driving. As in, sometimes am I too cocksure of myself? Am I too blasé, or is she too risk averse? I don't know. I suppose it's more a case of like, look, if either one of us fucks up to such a degree that the other one is like, what the hell are you doing on this long drive? That is a lot of time in the car to either keep me playing it back Final Destination style, or at the very least that's a lot of time to potentially, shall we just say it's a lot of time to potentially argue. Not that well, I hope we don't argue, but until whatever happens, you don't know. So we'll see. I will say though, bringing that sort of bringing on to something I did want to discuss, because I'm sure I've mentioned it before, but when I've had a quick look through some older videos, I'm not fond of AI stuff, but when I've been needing to try and find whether I've covered a topic, I have defaulted to Copilot to just produce a quick summary for a lot of it. And I suppose in that sense Copilot does have its uses, but that's about as much use as I personally find it. Hey, is that an Arnage? It is. Bentley Arnage. Whether it's an R or a T is another question altogether. When I've mentioned about am I a bit too aggressive and things, that people do, I've seen people talk about it in other places, and to a point, I suppose to a point they are kind of right. It is not an invalid way of thinking about it or looking at it. People talk about times where you've got to be aggressive when you drive and times when you've got to back off. And I'm not sure I like that description of it. But I suppose there isn't any other. I suppose a lot of people, not speaking illogically, I try to think it's a case of like, well, what other word from the thesaurus would you use? Because however I would describe it, I'd be willing to bet aggression and defence turn up in the thesaurus. But I don't like what those words would mean in relation to driving. There are times where you've got to go, there are times where you've got to put the hammer down. There are also times where you need to know where to put the hammer away. Wouldn't mind a 5 Series myself, if I could afford one. Oh yes, they finished doing all this roadworks here. Now what does this mean here? Oh, this has changed. I'm not sure I like this. This roundabout for a long time, well, it used to be basically a roundabout, i.e. you go round where I'm turning left, just used to go straight, and where the van ahead of me has come to a stop, so the pickup truck, which you might possibly see in frame, that used to be a separate right turn. I'm not sure I like what they've done here. I mean, if it helps the traffic flow and stops Bury St Edmunds backing up, who am I to discuss? Who am I to say no? But for a long time it was one way round it, and if you screwed up, there was a sort of a break in the roundabout where you could go back through it. But yeah, back to the aggression and defence argument. I'm not sure I like those descriptions for driving, if I'm honest. But at the same time, there is sometimes no other way to describe it. Sometimes you are absolutely on it and hammer down, and sometimes it is just, well, you do you. Can you get up to that sort of speed? Can you do whatever? I suppose what a lot of people need to do is they need to recognise what skill they actually have versus what their car is capable of delivering. So for example, this V40, far more capable than some of Volvo's other vehicles over the years. Far more capable. But would I, without a lot of modifications, would I throw it on a track day? No. I would show it some corners like I have done today, but it is not a driver's car. Although arguably with the manual, you could say, well, it is now, but things having a manual now is. I think the problem is so using the aggression and pacifism, whatever the right word is, to go along with it. Like, look, we've proven as humans we screw up too much when we drive, so they're having to take a lot of the decisions away from us. I don't like it as much as the next person, but there are some times where it is nice just to get out of a long drive, and guess what? It's only my accelerator leg that's feeling a bit funky. And because I've used my speed limiter, actually it's spent most of its time fairly stretched. So actually I'm not too bothered. But that's just my view, my thought. Oh, hello. A C70. Don't see many of them around anymore. What wheels have they shoved that on? Huh. That's on some S40R design 5-spoke wheels, which I'm pretty sure were not a option on the Cs at all. Park next to it. So I apologise, it's been a poorly planned Swacecast compared to the others, and I've come to the end of my journey sooner than I thought, but also didn't have as far to go, / I can't go as far as I'd like because of said petrol prices. It's a nice shade of blue. Which is a shame Volvo never really made that more of a driver's car than it could have been, especially with its folding metal top. Anyway, I apologise about this being a more wandery Swacecast than others. Some of it's just been brain dumping, some of it's just been I'm exhausted. I haven't really had much time off this year, just for me, / just for me and Sarah. So the next couple of weeks are going to be hopefully the recharge and reset I need, and it's going to be hard without Izzy and Toby around, but at the same time I love Toby. He's a little character, especially like when he's been caught doing something he shouldn't. The way he sort of looks up at you with big eyes and goes, sort of almost like trying to justify himself. Don't know if it's a Tabby thing or whether it's a him thing. At the same time, though, I do love the snuggles at whatever o'clock in the morning it is he comes for them. But there are times where recently I've just been like, did you have to now? So I'm just doing that just to make the ignition go off. There have been times where it's been, do you have to do this now? I'm flat out, mate. So we'll see. Like I say, it's been such. I'd started this off with good intentions, and it's not really gone the way I'd like it to. But there we are. I had things to do. I've got a full tank, and petrol's a bit cheaper. I just took the opportunity to get in the car and go. This next week of work is going to be so difficult because it's just me and one other person for most of the week. As in, it's just volumes have changed at the most inopportune time. But there we are. So I'll try and round off things try and bring things to a conclusion before I walk away for today. So yes, on the point about things like the electric third line seats, the electric reclining ones, I do get it from making things more able friendly, more so anyone can do it. You don't need to be able bodied to do X, Y, and Z. It just, in my mind, it just seems counterintuitive. It's another thing to break. It's more weight. Maybe I'd hope I'll be wrong, but I suppose they wouldn't put them in if they didn't think they would last. It'd be like these power seats in this car. They wouldn't put them in if they didn't think they'd last. That's with the Xpeng. It might be electric, an electric car, so it might have more than enough torque to compensate for the extra weight. So who knows? I suppose that is the trade-off with going to electric for a lot of things, though. A lot of things that we've stripped out of cars to save weight could start coming back because there's more bang for buck on the on a Volt compared to a bit of octane. The aggression and the when to push and when to pull back. It's probably the best way to put it. It's when you need to push and when you need to hold back. The problem is I suppose with that is risk management. Some people have no risk management. Some people have too much risk management. But then again, I'd rather have too much risk management because you can ease. It's easier to try and get someone to reduce the risk management than to try and get someone who's not used to it to accept it. I suppose it's a bit like someone who's had liken it to, everyone's probably had a friend like this, and if you haven't, then perhaps you were the friend like it. I'd liken it to some people who've got friends who have got a lot of rules at home compared to some other friends who've got no rules at home. And the friends who've got no rules at home, when it comes to having to follow new rules, they fight it, they won't do it, whereas those who have had too many rules ease into fewer rules a lot easier than that. So that's where I hope that point lays out. I don't like the description, and we'll see how the drive up to Scotland goes, because it'll be A14, A1, A66, M6, and then back roads from there. Well, there is only back roads, I think, across to Ayr. And then what we'll do in Scotland, I don't know. Might even see if we can try and find the James Bond road. Bit of a come down from a DB5 to have a Suzuki Swace stood there for its picture, but there we go. That'll be interesting. I'm just looking forward to a bit of downtime. And as for fuel prices, I'm hoping they continue to come down. Fuel here at Tesco today is 6p more expensive than it was at Sainsbury's yesterday, where I filled this up. I'm hoping the squeaky clutch pedal in this is just the actuator, not the clutch itself. It feels fine to me. That's my phone vibrating. I installed Temu for something that someone wanted me to have a look at something, and since then it's just been a pain in the damn arse. Just leave me alone. mind you, my brother's going to be having this car for whilst we're away, because he might as well, even if he only runs it into town to do his Saturday shopping, it's better than being sat on my driveway for the thick end of 2 weeks. But it also means he should be able to go to his board gaming club, and just in general, just do what he would like. Going to help him look for a car shortly, I think. Sounds like he's ready to start making moves, so I'll see what help I can offer him. Trying to think if I've rounded off the point on the fuel prices. So the fuel prices, they shouldn't be as expensive as they are, but like I say, in the UK we have a unique way of paying for them. We have a unique taxation on them, so it is. Motorists, particularly now, internal combustion motorists, are seen as an easy target, and they always have been. We always have been. Motorists have always been an easy target to generate tax and income and revenue. We'll see. There's a video thought around that. I want to have a look into feasibility, and we'll see. As to whether, I'm hoping to get this video edited and uploaded whilst we are away, but if not, then this will probably be June by the time this comes out, so I'll be able to say how the drive up to Ayr goes, and hopefully it goes without issue or incident, but we'll see. So we'll sign off as we do normally. Drive safe, look after yourselves. I'll see you next time.